We gather here to commemorate this International Women's Day, a focal point for celebrating women's achievements and highlighting women's rights. I want to thank the Honorable Helen Hayes MP for hosting this special event on sexual violence against the women of Tigray on this important platform. As the fourth pillar of democracy, freedom of the press should be encouraged and supported, especially in this current climate of disinformation, of wars. We have seen the lack of free media in Russia, Ethiopia, and Eritrea. Keeping citizens under complete darkness creates a false and distorted reality. Governments who stifle media can operate with impunity without transparency and accountability. That is why I want to thank Lucy for speaking when it mattered and speaking truth to power. That is what freedom of the press means. Thank you. The 16-month-long Ethiopian conflict has shown the savagery of sexual violence and barbarism that women suffer in war. It has undoubtedly demonstrated the lack of tangible protective mechanisms to safeguard women and girls in conflict settings. I found this to be the case while I was serving as a Minister of Women, Children and Youth. I joined the government during the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, after only 8 months in my post, the already uncertain climate was worsened by an arbitrary war. It was a genuine disappointment when my government went to war with our people. With the second highest population and the youngest median age in Africa, I knew our tasks and challenges were too great and the cost too dear to pursue such a course. On my first visit to Mekelle, following the initial assault by government forces, I met with young women and girls as young as 10-year-olds who were raped by Ethiopian and Eritrean soldiers. The hospitalized women and girls who shared their horror stories were manifested by their evidence scars and wounds. The young girls were so violently raped, they sustained severe injuries, such as fistula and emotional trauma. I saw the hurt, anguish, and broken spirit behind their eyes. Beyond the horrific and brutal acts of sexual violence, the women and girls of Tigray suffered. There was something systematic about the rapes. It felt premeditated, and the complicit silence that followed. And the complicit silence that followed, and the attempts to thwart investigations and block the resulting report was dummy. I quickly became at odds with the Prime Minister's office and the Prosperity Party leadership after the reports. Of course, I tried to work with the system to help Tigray women and girls. But any request for assistance and funds on our emergency action plan to gender-based violence and child protection for Tigray was ignored by the Ministry of Finance and all other relevant stakeholders, agencies. Ethiopian women have been failed by all the trusted agencies who were there to protect. All ignore their humanity. Women and girls have been the first victims of this brutal conflict and the last to be remembered. What seemingly began as a politically motivated operation quickly turned into an ethnically tinged conflict. The lines became blurred. There was no clear distinction between the TPLF and the Tigray people. When the government instructed the implementation of a discriminatory act in all federal agencies and institutions to dismiss Tigrayan staff. I refuse to carry out such a reprehensible directive. I reacted the only way I could by speaking out despite the political cost. However, it was impossible to continue to work with the government. I could not trade my humanity. There is a fundamental uncertainty about the current conflict and the country's political insecurity as things stand. We are in a highly charged and volatile situation. We have an ethnically tinged conflict, droughts, famine, a polarized public, questionable economy, and the polarification of small arms in the hands of civilians. It's a recipe for disaster waiting to happen if things don't change drastically. There are also impacts of devastating droughts and famine in the Somali region as we focus on the conflict. The real effects of climate change are also taking place in the background, out of sight. The Somali regional government has not adequately responded to the crisis amid allegations of corruption and mismanagement of emergency funds. I urge the UK government and the international community and the independent humanitarian organizations to respond to the plights of this desperate people. We also have the humanitarian crisis worsening in Tigray region because of the government's de facto blockade. Action must be taken against the Ethiopian government if a humanitarian corridor is not genuinely opened. There is a real need for political will and a pressure from the international community and relevant organizations to push all sides involved in the conflict to agree to abide by some semblance of the Geneva Conventions and adhere to the protection of civilians, especially women and girls. Any intended aid and assistance for the federal government must be contingent on the safety of civilians as a solution to tackle the urgent situation. The current tabled sanction bill HR 66 by the US government is vital for peace and security for Ethiopia. I hope the UK government also considers tabling a similar bill. In 2019, the UK's second largest aid recipient was Ethiopia after Pakistan. In the future, I urge the UK government to examine any further aid to Ethiopia. The protection and safety of women and girls must take priority. I urge the UK government and its international partners to help work out a peaceful resolution to the war in Ethiopia. The transition to a post-conflict society must include women in leadership positions in any peace processes. Ethiopian women can no longer tolerate political tokenism nor continue in the role of window dressing. Our voices and impact must be heard and felt. Finally, we must show our solidarity with Ethiopian women and girls by standing with them as fellow women and their supporters. We should support each other in our struggles and pain. Thank you for having me. Thank you.